Welcome to the Real Deals Nordic webinar. I'm Taku Tumwasha, editor of Real Deals. Against a challenging fundraising market, this webinar explores the LP perspective of investing in the Nordics and the challenges when they are facing allocating capital. We will also explore how GPs can adjust their investment strategies to meet sustainability demands and increased demand for co-investment. Before we begin, I'd like to thank today's speakers and everyone who's attending. And also, the conversation will last for about 45 minutes, and attendees can submit questions, which I'll ask the speakers either during the discussion or at the end. You can also see at the bottom of your screen in Zoom, you can see a Q&A tab, so you can pose your questions there. During the webinar, we'll also be conducting a poll that could be accessed in the same area. You should be able to see somewhere that says poll, and we'd really appreciate your participation. Finally, I would also like to take this occasion to launch our Real Deals Nordic Summit, scheduled for 10th of October in Stockholm, and sponsored by Capman and SVCA. We hope to see you there. Now, let's kick things off. Can I ask the speakers to introduce themselves and tell us a bit about their firm? So we'll start with Christopher, please.
Thank you, Taco. And hello, everyone. My name is Christopher. I'm a partner at Verdane and the Chief Operating Officer. My responsibilities are sort of LP fund-related, organizational-related, and I also run the value creation teams and the internal teams, the CFO office and so on. Prior to that, I've built Nordic tech successes, which have been private equity owned for 15 years. Verdane, we have around 5 billion euros assets under management, 2.5 billion euros of investing funds, approximately. Our ambition is to be the #1 on growth equity investing in Europe. We feel like we are the #1 on the growth equity investing in the Nordics. And we're around 140 people across Nordics and Germany and UK. As part of our value creation offering, we have a team of 35 operating experts, which we call the Elevate teams, that work very, very closely with the companies. And we build magnificent ecosystems of those companies, for those 120 companies that we have ownership stakes into. That's us.
Thank you. And then Jonathan?
Yes, so my name is Jonathan Lund-Kirchhoff. I'm working at Altor, responsible for investor relations, our sort of fundraising efforts. Altor is a Nordic-focused mid-market firm that have been in market during the last 20 years. Basically, we have our 20-year anniversary now coming up in 2 months' time. We have raised 5 funds to date, have a global investor base, are today focused on the Nordic region and DACH, approximately 100 people on the payroll. And we also have as a vision to be the best Nordic manager, I guess, within the mid-market space.
Perfect, thank you. And then I'll move on to Alan next.
Thanks, Taku. I'm Alan Gold. I am a senior investment director in the Aberdeen private equity team and the lead portfolio manager of our FTSE 250 investment trust, Aberdeen Private Equity Opportunities. Aberdeen Private Equity has been a fund-of-fund investor really since the 1990s, specialised in primaries, secondaries and co-investments. And we've had a sort of strong Nordic focus for throughout that time, and really backing a lot of the managers through from venture capital through to the larger managers like EQT and Nordic Capital. And I'm helping lead our Nordic coverage along with our French, Iberian and Pan-European coverage as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And then Ali?
Yeah, sure. My name is Ali Sangari. I'm a principal in the PE solutions team here at Hayfin. We have roughly 30 billion AUM across all the strategies on the platform, most of them being of a credit nature. So we stand out a little bit, being kind of the only equity-related investment team on the platform. I myself have been covering the Nordic market for almost coming up to a decade now. I started out my career in M&A, covering the region, and then quite quickly moved on to the secondaries, private equity secondary space quite a while ago. Within the strategy that we employ, we focus on best-in-class co-investments and GP-led secondaries, among other things.
Okay, and yep, and then Stina, please.
Thank you, Taku. My name is Stina Velfors. I'm a partner with Cubera. Cubera is a fund-of-fund manager with offices in Oslo and Stockholm. We're a team of approximately 30 people managing 5 billion euro AUM. We are a primary and secondary investor, both locally in the Nordics, but also on a global scale.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So yeah, I'll just jump straight into it. So international LPs have long favored Nordic private equity firms. Given the current market conditions, would you say that's still the same? I guess I'll probably start with Alan there, asking this question.
Yeah, I mean, we've long been overweight to the Nordics. I mean, we principally invest in Europe, and in terms of our European investment, it's Northwestern Europe and then North America, and historically done some stuff in Asia, but it's really been North America and Northwestern Europe. And the Nordics, we really like for, well, a number of reasons, but if we look at the sort of key pillars, so firstly, in terms of the macro, it's relatively supportive. So GDP growth has been pretty consistent. And if you look ahead, the Nordics is expected to grow faster in the coming years than, you know, UK, France, and Germany. There's low unemployment, but there's also significant safety nets to those that are unemployed, high standard of living, high education levels, high technology adoption. So if you look at that layer, I mean, it ticks a lot of the boxes, frankly, and rule of law is very much respected. And then you look again down to capital markets. There's a lot of supportive local banks, and there's an IPO market there for smaller companies, relatively smaller companies, that just doesn't exist in many places. And that's all underpinned by the strong support from local investors as well. And then you move to PE itself, and it's a mature market that has long been accepted. There's a good amount of entrepreneurialism. There's a good amount of spin-outs from large conglomerates, particularly in Sweden. So it's there's a well-defined trodden path around taking a small business to becoming an international business. So you've got players, their fund sizes around, you know, 300, 400 million or less that sort of professionalize a business. And you've got the larger Nordic players who can take a business pan-Nordic. And then you've got the bigger players that can take that pan-Nordic player and take it more internationally and globally. So there's a lot of great things about it. And if you look around the historic returns, and we shouldn't be fixated on the past, but if you look historically, we used to run numbers from various places, Burgess and Preqin, that showed the Nordics in Europe, at least, was one of the highest performers. I think the Benelux was the highest performer, but Nordics was close in behind in terms of money multiples. So for all of these reasons, we're big supporters and will continue to be.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I guess, Jonathan, would you agree with that sentiment then, from what you see?
No, absolutely. I agree with everything that was said. I think one thing that I would supplement with perhaps is that, I mean, in the fundraising process today, there is a little bit of an educational journey to be made for some of the, you know, global institutions in order to sort of pinpoint and highlight all the aspects that was just mentioned now. And I think one additional flavor that we have seen lately is also with sort of geopolitical uncertainties and the war in Ukraine, is that we've seen some, I guess, US institutions being a little bit more biased towards investing in their home market instead of sort of going to Europe as a region in itself, and also sort of the Nordic countries in that regard. I think there are some nuances to it, and a little bit of an educational journey that we sometimes need to help and guide our institutions on that look at investing in us.
Okay, thank you. And then, Christoph, have you also noticed that some international institutional investors are probably not looking at the Nordics anymore, or are you seeing any dip in that activity?
No, I can only agree with Alan and Jonathan. I think we see the same things. I think to sort of highlight some of the things that Alan said as well is, quite, very, very strong returns and very consistent returns. I mean, we're close to 4x unrealized over 20 years, close to 60% across IRR through cycles, all funds in top quartile and so on. And I think that is very much supported by the stability of the markets. So it's, very, very sort of political, geographical stability, both from consumers and business to business. I think what we see sometimes our challenge on is sort of the size of the markets. So I mean, the Nordics does not contain a lot of people compared to Germany, Europe, US, and so on. But then again, also there's a lot of sort of unicorns and great companies sort of per capita being built out of the Nordics. So that is kind of the sentiment that we see is, safe, stable, great returns, and then some challenges to educate US LPs, as Jonathan alluded to, and sort of outside of Europe LPs, mainly due to, at least our experience, market size.
Okay. And then, Stina, would you say, obviously there's some old, established names out there in the Nordics, but do you think maybe, I wouldn't want to call them smaller, but the other sort of managers are able to also attract the same kind of LPs, or do you think it's a bit difficult at the moment?
No, but I very much agree with the previous speakers, and I think Alan mentioned that sort of there's both spin out and new emerging managers in the Nordics, and I think it's quite interesting because it is quite a mature private equity market, with the first funds being set up in the 1980s, and you can see sort of the big brand names being around for quite some time. They spin out, but they're also in this year new managers raising funds. We count over 70 GPs or managers in the Nordics with a population of 20 million, not billion, as Christopher mentioned. And I mean, it is tougher times to attract capital, but I would say that a good sort of historical performance, a stable market, yes, it's doable to attract capital from both Nordics, Europe, and the US. I think it's slightly harder for a sort of overseas LP to find the smaller ones. Many of these 70 GPs are quite small cap or even micro cap managers. So it's more for them to try to reach out, or for an LP based far away to try to evaluate to go with a micro cap manager or with one of the larger ones.
Okay, thank you. And then, Ali, I mean, obviously, would you agree with the general consensus? And maybe from your perspective, obviously, a different strategy, but it would be good to hear what you've been seeing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely echo what's been said already. I think, on the back of what Stina said around, the established heritage, a very mature market. I think what's also noteworthy is that throughout, there's been high quality leadership across the Nordic private equity firms, and I feel really that consistently demonstrated those leadership qualities, being adapted, articulating their vision and value proposition to prospective LPs, and I think that's also kind of contributed to their favorable perception in the market, which everyone kind of points towards. I think one other thing which kind of goes back to the core question, if that's still the case. I think, ESG is something that the region was very early on. I think there are a couple of managers in Sweden and Norway, where they kind of were dealing with impact investing before it was really a thing, right? And as we all know from the kind of broader LP community, that's very high up on the agenda, and it is the case for us as well. So I think from all those perspectives, definitely agree with what everyone said. But I think there's kind of an interesting way of how the market is playing out, being nimble.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll definitely touch on the ESG topic later on in this conversation. But just in terms of individual types of strategies, are you seeing any particular ones that LPs are favouring within the Nordics? I guess I'll come to Stina on that one.
I think the answer is ESG and sustainability to a great extent. Exactly as Ali mentioned, I mean, ESG and sustainability has been on top of the agenda for quite some time in the Nordics. But obviously, we're also starting to see more funds being more specific or even being impact funds. And we do see quite a lot of capital coming into funds that are sort of profiling themselves as more sustainable or impact. Otherwise, I mean, we say it's a mature and fairly large market, but compared to sort of global private equity, it's not a huge market. So you can't really find that many sector-specific funds. There are a few, but I would say that most funds have chosen 2 to 3 sectors which they focus on, and I think that's needed in this size of an economy. I mean, you can't really go out and say we're going to benchmark the top 10 healthcare funds because you can't find 10 Nordic healthcare funds. But I mean, you see strategies and I mean, it's not even a large growth equity market. You see that everyone calls it buyout, even if it really is growth equity or growth buyout. So it's by tradition, many things look similar, but when you start to scratch the surface, it isn't at all. But I would say that just as internationally or in the US, it's technology, healthcare that's been sort of on top of the agenda in recent years, anything software. But maybe someone would like to add, but it's not a sort of, you see very distinct strategies. I don't know, maybe someone disagrees. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know if there's anyone who has a view on that, or I can just direct the question to sort of Chris or Alan.
I can sort of jump in if you don't mind. I mean, I would agree with Stina. I think building on that, I think if the green transition is as big an opportunity as it could be, I think there's a number of Nordic managers, not least 2 that are on this call in Altor and Verdane, that are kind of driving this particular theme forward, and really building on Ali's point, the ESG focus has been there a long time, but now we're starting to see a lot of Nordic managers using it very offensively, like kind of as a value creation tool or an investment strategy, and leading the way. So that's one area that really the Nordics appears to be leading on. I would just reiterate Stina's point around technology and healthcare. I mean, particularly technology, back to what I said at the start, the sort of early adoption of the internet, for example, and the fact that in terms of relative to other regions, vast majority of people have access. I think it's over 95% have access, and it's very, very high usage, even compared to somewhere like the United States. And that has meant that just that sort of, again, allied with the culture of entrepreneurialism has created a lot of these, technology-based winners, the likes of, you'd say obviously Spotify and Klarna, but even going, way back, the likes of Nokia and Ericsson, it always seems like Nordic companies are at the forefront of a technological move. And so we are seeing more technology specialists appear, and whilst the market isn't that deep, relatively speaking, they are having a great deal of success. But even then, just to round this off, I mean, doesn't have to be cutting edge stuff either. I think that there are a number of managers that are kind of around 200-300 million in fund size that just play the lower mid market consistently very, very well in their respective countries. And equally, there are managers that are maybe 500 million to a billion, billion and a half, 2 billion, whatever it may be, that are very adept at taking those sort of country-specific companies and making them pan-Nordic or international. So, I mean, those are the sort of themes I think are particularly compelling.
Yeah, I can only add to that, digitalization and decarbonization are kind of we have seen a strong megatrend within digitalization, and it's continuing. And then the big decarbonization impact wave is coming, and I think the Nordics and we feel right at the forefront of that internationally. I just wanted to, and this is basically confirming what Tina and Alan is saying, but I wanted to elaborate a little bit on the why, or at least why I think, and I feel like, the Nordic societies very much sort of embrace sustainability and impact genuinely in the sort of the core roots of the societies. We see it in the consumer trends, and we see it in the business to business trends and so on, that it's sort of genuine. It's been the same with digitalization. We have very digitalized societies for many years, when it comes to fintech and payments for consumers, and when it comes to sort of shopping experiences and how companies operate and so on. So it's very, very sort of genuine. And that also trickles down into the GPs themselves. So, I mean, we as a GP, we're, fully digitalized, have our own data warehouse with all data at the fingertips, very modern culture, very sort of down to earth, flat, little hierarchical, very collaborative, and genuinely passionate about sustainability. And when those things becomes part of our own business and genuine, you tend to sort of understand and care for it more, which again, of course, hopefully makes us the best investors within those megatrends.
Okay, that's perfect. And then Ali, are you seeing any of the general themes that we're also seeing across the globe in terms of continuation funds and that kind of single asset continuation funds and that kind of stuff? Is that something that you're seeing in the Nordics at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think across the board globally, we've seen the emergence of the continuation fund kind of maturing at different paces across different regions. And I think back to the point around established heritage around investing in equities across the region has potentially led to people being having quite a kind of firm view on how they monetize investments and think about investments. So what we've seen is the emergence of the continuation vehicle coming through slightly later, I would say, compared to the rest of Europe in the Nordics. But I think as some of the GPs have kind of taken the leap and started pioneering these types of transactions, there is people are getting on the bandwagon, so to speak, and we're seeing the opening of that market really in the Nordics. And I think that also points towards what Alan said previously, in being a very liquid market. I think this again adds another toolbox in another toolkit in the toolbox, so to speak, for managers.
Okay, and then Jonathan as well, are you seeing the same sort of trends, continuation vehicles and co-investments as well?
Well, absolutely. I think there's not a week that goes by without me being sort of contacted by GP-led advisors that wants to sell the structures to us. So that definitely sort of happens to us on a weekly basis, more or less. And yes, in terms of co-investments, etc., I think that is today becoming a bit of the norm, where we have, at least our investors are very much sort of appreciating and want to have a pretty clear flow of co-investments coming alongside the primary commitments that they have done in order to get some direct access to a few selected investment opportunities as well. So that is definitely, I'm not sure I would say it's a clear trend. I think this has been the case for quite some time. So it's just a continuation of what we've seen for quite some time.
Okay. Yeah, so that's all really, the positive things that we were talking about. But maybe let's try work out, if there are any challenges for international LPs investing in the Nordic funds, Nordic-based funds even. So Chris, maybe I'll come to you first. Are there any particular negatives that you hear?
I mean, we talked a little bit about market size and so on, and that's something that, of course, we get questions on. One of the topics, but that depends a little bit on the setup of the GP. But for us, we have a Swedish-based funds, so we have actually chosen to have funds within our sort of home markets in the Nordics and not go Luxembourg or anywhere else. And that, of course, comes with some questions around, tax setup and some, political evaluations and so on. So those things we're getting some questions on. And then, I mean, I'd love to hear what the other panelists say about the challenges. But those would be my contributions.
No, absolutely. So yeah, I think Jonathan, you.
Yeah, no, but I can follow on that one. I think we also went onshore 2014 and sort of took the decision to go from Jersey-based funds to onshore Swedish-based funds. So I think what Christopher said is exactly the same sort of story that we have seen. But I would say we obviously saw more questions indeed around it during the onboarding 2014. I think, Sweden as a home domicile for fund structures has actually proven to be, sustainable and a very efficient structure for at least the vast majority of our LP institutions that wants to invest with us. So I think if I were to sort of see a trend line, I think it has become less of an issue. It's more a matter of when we onboard a new LP to our Swedish-based structures that these questions pop up again. So all in all, I wouldn't sort of treat that as a big hurdle anymore, to be honest. I'm not sure there are any other hurdles either, to be honest.
And I can only agree to that. So now it's a sort of a proven market with many funds in that, which is great to see, right? Funds are also in the home markets.
Okay.
So it's much more mature.
And then, Alan, would you agree that maybe that's probably the only thing that you could say is a negative?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, was it Ali? Sorry, I'll let you answer it. I'll let you answer it, Ali.
No, go for it, Alan, please.
Okay, I'll go for it then. But all I was going to do was agree with Christopher and Jonathan. But to be honest with you, I mean, we had some problems from a tax perspective and structuring perspective with a fund in Finland, maybe like 10 years ago or so. We had to put a sort of holding company in to make it work. But I mean, I think things have moved on since then, and certainly we've never had any issues sort of that weren't that were insurmountable. I think the main thing is commercially, as Christopher said, that it's not the deepest market, the competition is high, and once funds get to a certain point, you've got people that come into the market as well internationally. So the entry pricing tends to be relatively high. It tends to be pretty transparent and fair pricing. You're not going to get too many bargains, but you're getting quality. But yeah, generally I would just say straightforward place to invest. English language speaking. I mean, they speak better English than in Scotland, frankly. So and that's quite embarrassing. Institutional firms, strong ESG, transparent. Yeah, very, very good.
Okay, very much.
And Ali, could I just add sort of a a fund of funds perspective? I mean, Cubera has two Nordic focused funds, one primary fund and one secondary fund, which means that we go quite deep in the Nordics and actually try to maintain relationships with all these 70 GPs I mentioned. And we do quite a lot of reference calls with Asian or US based LPs. And I would say the sort of sourcing and selection in the Nordics can actually be quite hard in the smaller space if you're not very close to the market. And understanding that Finland is actually quite different from Sweden, who's different from Denmark, that the Nordics are actually 4 distinct different countries, and selecting 2 or 3 really good Nordic-based small cap funds aren't really that easy if you're not local, if you're not here. And we see sometimes that the funds, it's always like that, but the funds with the best placement agents gets the most money, but it's not necessarily the best performing funds. So you actually have to do a bit of homework in the Nordics if you're going to find the best managers. And when you find the best managers, they're likely closed for new relationships. So just sort of getting access to the market, who to invest with, and open that door is actually networking and relationship building, and it can take some time just to sort of get away from those always as fun tax and structure questions, which I completely agree is not a big thing. I would say it's more on sort of the commercial side or selection side.
Right. Okay. So yeah, this also kind of relates to a question that's been posed by Daniel Kylander, who's asked, have you seen international LPs favor pan-Nordic players rather than country-specific funds? So he goes on, when pan-European PE managers start investing in the Nordics, how does this change the dynamics for local players? So I guess, you know, if you have a view on that, and then maybe anyone else as well.
Hi, Daniel. No, I think that sort of it really goes with size. As most funds grow, they tend to become sort of investing in 2 countries, 3 countries, or becoming pan-Nordic. It's quite different. We see that many sort of, the further away the LP is, they go for the larger names and more pan-Nordic, because if you want a Nordic exposure, you might not go straight into a Finnish small cap fund. Maybe you go with sort of a pan-Nordic mid or large player instead to sort of get more diversification in one sense. But we also see other LPs that are quite sort of looking for the best manager in each country. And then you have to go down in size a bit generally. So I wouldn't really say that those 2 compete head to head. It's much more on sort of the exposure you're looking for versus you actually gain access to and meet and who's performing the best. But from sort of lower mid-market and up, most funds are investing at least 2 to 3 Nordic countries, I'd say.
Okay. And I don't know if anyone else has a view on that question. Ali?
Just maybe going back to the kind of the challenges, just to add before coming back to this one. I think echoing everything that everyone's said around the stability and you know, challenges actually being really few. But you know, one thing that we think about you know, from a macro point of view, as opposed to kind of a structural financial system point of view, is you know, when we look at businesses and opportunities in the region, you know, it's a region with small currencies, right? And small currencies tend to see a heightened level of volatility during you know, times of uncertainty. So that's one thing that I think you know, should be taken into account. And then also specifically, I mean, I wouldn't say that across all of the Nordics, but for you know, Norway and Sweden, you know, they have very levered residential real estate sector, higher than European average in terms of you know, disposable income to loans outstanding. So I think that can have you know, real ripple effects should you know, something happen that would you know, trigger that. So I think those are the 2 things. But on average, I think very favorable. And then to the other question, again, I agree with what Stina said. I think there's a natural progression, right? You know, because of the lack of depth after a certain size, you know, you really kind of need to. And I think a lot of the managers that have gone you know, pan-Nordic or even pan-European have really done so quite successfully. And many of them who, you know, traditionally were seen as, you know, specific Nordic manager now, you know, have really become, you know, household, if you can say that, within the private equity industry, you know, names across the European market as well as the global market.
Okay. And then also, if you sort of flip that question on yourself, then do you think sort of local LPs also are backing the sort of, local domestic private equity firms? Does anyone have a specific view on this one? I can go to Jonathan if you have one. Or
yeah, they are for sure, backing Nordic managers, but I think they are also very much well aware of the benefits of diversification. So they also tend to sort of go global in the programs if they are sizable enough, in order to get a strong diversification, both geographically but also sort of across different asset classes. So I think it's not that they are putting all eggs in one basket, and that being the Nordic region, but they are rather seeking diversification as well, even if obviously it's easier for them to attain strong relationships with managers that sits, I guess, distance wise closer to them than across the globe.
And then we see also, to just add on that, we see often that the differences between the Nordic countries are also a little bit apparent. So often Finnish LPs would really want some sort of Finnish presence in terms of deals or local office or some activity contributing to the Finnish markets and economy. And also probably for them also to understand better and sort of be closer to what they invest in. Same with Danish LPs, same with Swedish LPs, same with Norwegian LPs, and so on. So that's often something that we see as part of the dialogue with the local LPs is deep dive into local activity and or team.
Okay. And then there's sort of a related question here that I'll probably direct to Stina. So most growing Nordic funds expand to nearby geographic areas. Are they generally successful in expanding, exporting the Nordic advantage, as Martin Thunberg calls it? And so do you have a view on that? And does the geography strategy and expansion dilute interest by LPs?
I would say that generally most funds that have expanded outside the Nordics have been successful. I mean, in the larger end, you have EQT, IK, Nordic Capital, and Altor. I mean, EQT is today a global firm. Is it a Nordic firm? That's maybe another webinar or discussion, at least. But generally, sort of the managers that pace themselves in the expansion outside the Nordics and sort of gone for one or two deals in the first fund and sort of slowly developed that exposure, generally done it quite well. It seems that sort of the Nordic model works quite well in the German-speaking part of Europe. So it's not something that it hasn't been a very big thing except for the larger funds, but we see a lot of the mid-market funds expanding into sort of German-speaking Europe. I don't think we have. That's the closest markets. You do Sweden first, and then you do Denmark, and then you go to Germany. So not really any big issues there. But I mean, not all of those investments have been amazing or super successful. But it hasn't really affected the funds or the managers in a way that makes LPs shy away. But obviously, if you start as a local Nordic investor and then suddenly next fund you're going to do 50% Europe, some LPs might raise an eyebrow and have some questions on that.
Okay.
It's very much a sort of credentials. What's your background? Have you done this before on that?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then Alan, I don't know if you had a view on that topic or.
No, not really. I think Stina's covered it, really. I think the important thing that she said there was that those that are patient and do it gradually and pick their spots, pick their sectors where they're particularly strong, that translate well to other geographies. But there's plenty of managers that have successfully moved out of the Nordics. And So it's not uncommon, and I've not really heard of too many that haven't heard of any actually that have failed at it really. So no, not much to add.
Okay. And then I'll move on to the final question here. Obviously globally, we're seeing LPs demanding to see ESG credentials from GPs. Is that something that obviously translates to Nordics? We've already touched on this a bit. And then also to ask you, how can a GP sort of alleviate some of those concerns that maybe an LP might have? I don't know if, Jonathan, if you want to field this question for us.
But I can start. I think there's been an exponential increase, I guess, in interest around ESG and sustainability around the LP community, I think, and obviously sort of globally in society. And we have seen that sort of exponential, spike in interest, not least when we onboarded our fourth fund to Sweden in 2014, and then from sort of that baseline until today and 2019 when we raised our fifth fund, it's just a massive sort of explosion in terms of interest and focus. I mean, we have global international investors that sort of fly in teams, ironically enough, given that it's sort of sustainability and ESG we talk about, but with 5-6 individuals sitting a full day in our office scrutinizing us on all dimensions when it relates to ESG and sustainability. So for sure, that is definitely the case, and I think we are in the Nordic countries, I think, meeting those expectations quite well. And there is one of the more famous consultancy firms have actually sort of named the Nordic countries the sort of Silicon Valley of sustainability, and I think we are actually that to a great extent. So, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Christopher, would you agree as well?
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about a little bit earlier also, I feel to some extent the Nordic societies and markets, there's real genuine feelings about ESG and sustainability. So for us, it's actually quite simple to, I mean, we want to push for, Article 9 funds anyway, and we want, to be B Corp certified, and we want sort of those kind of, to reach those kind of milestones. We've always pushed for those kind of milestones because we think they make us a better firm. And then, of course, when we do those kind of things, it's more about showing what we're already doing. So we have been doing that for years, but now we have mentioned, I mean, as Jonathan also says, the sort of the requirements around it from LPs has exponentially increased, which I think is great. So I think the answer to the question is that yes, LPs are demanding to see more ESG credentials. And then my best advice on how to meet those requirements is, see the business value in it and sort of do it properly for your own sake anyway. And then it's easy sort of documenting afterwards or showing documentation.
And I think also just to add to that, in terms of the kind of from a guidance and kind of regulatory point of view, Fondtorgsnämnden or I think they call in English, they call the Office of the Swedish Fund Selection Agency, which oversees the public pension funds. And I think there was some recent announcement that they were saying that they will be kind of working on requirements that managers systematically really integrates sustainability into their operations if they want capital from those institutions, which we know are big backers of private equity across the region. So I think it's probably true already today, but it's hard to find anything below Article 9 being raised in the region, right? But even the regulator or kind of the guidelines are also fueling that demand from society and from LPs.
Okay, I just realized our time is very short, so unfortunately I won't get a chance to ask Marit's 9 ones question. Yeah, I'd like to thank all the speakers for attending today. It's been a really interesting conversation. Before we leave, I'll just tell you some of the results from the polls. One of the question number 1 was, do you currently have Nordic LPs in any of your active funds? And out of the audience that was watching today, 61% said yes, so that's quite a high figure. Are you actively targeting Nordic LPs, which is the second question? Yep, it's about 75% said they were. And then also, do you think the tax structures in the Nordics are generally efficient for most investors? The majority of people said that they agreed. It's about 18% there. And then what is your sentiment when it comes to Nordic LPs? I think Nordic LPs, yeah, I think about 43% that said that Nordic LPs were supportive of the local market. So that's a bit of a consensus there on what everyone was saying today. So yeah, so that brings the webinar to a close. And once again, I want to thank the speakers today, so Stina, Jonathan, Alan, Ali, and Chris. Yeah, we hope to see you at the Real Deals Nordic Summit on the 10th of October in Stockholm. Thank you. Bye.